Welcome back to MVM. Today we have a Kickstarter preview. This one is for Homebrewers. It is from Greater Than Games. It is a 2 to 5 player dice management game in a way.
Yeah, it's definitely unique. It's almost like an action selection kind of mechanic, but you're limited by the dice you roll.
Yeah.
So we have the game set up in front of us. This is a game already in progress. This is kind of a sequel to Brewcrafters, if you remember that game. Same designers. This takes the brewing experience to the garage.
I know. So you're all your own independent brewcrafters, so to speak, and you're working in your garage with the equipment that you have, throwing different flavors into different pails to try to please the judges and score victory points during the Summerfest and the Oktoberfest. So there's two main scoring places within the game.
Yeah, it's pretty unique the way it's all handled. We'll talk about really quick the components of the game.
Yeah.
So you have these dice, and every player has 3 dice that they're going to roll every turn, and these are going to determine the actions that you take.
Yep, each of the dice have their own different face too. There's 6 different faces on here, and as we should say with this is completely a prototype.
Oh, for sure.
There's a lot of things that aren't done. We don't know if the artwork's done, if the graphic design's done. Obviously, we don't even have a box here sitting to show what the final product's going to look like, so just know that going in. So keep going with your components.
Yeah, so with the dice, it seems kind of random the way you're going to roll the dice and take actions. However, there's a lot of mitigation. You can actually trade dice with other players. You can pay money to change the face of the dice and things like that. You'll see the board here in front of us. At the bottom, you have the calendar track. Every month, you're going to have a random event that happens, that your group of brewers get together and do this event, except June and October are automatically set as Summerfest and Oktoberfest.
Yep, so each of those different calendar pieces, if you look at them, new one's going to flip over just as you said. There's 2 main actions that you can get, but they're dependent on whether or not you roll the calendar action. You can either take the calendar action and get the top part of that particular month as action, or you can spend $2 to take the bottom, and sometimes more or less powerful depending upon what you're trying to do on your actual player board or your garage yourself.
Yeah, and right above it you see the quality track. This tracks the quality of your 4 different brews. And during the 2 scoring phases, summer and October, you're going to score based on who is highest on each of these tracks. You're also going to get benefits as you move up these tracks. You're going to get actions, you're going to get money, you're going to get victory points just for doing that. And these tiles are all modular, so you can actually switch these out, and so the tracks are a little different every game.
You're also going to have the judges tiles. The judges are going to pay out at the end of the entire game. You're trying to get very specific types of flavors typically within each of your 4 different types of pails. The pails are your ales, your porters, your stouts, and then your IPAs. This is the scoring track over here, and you're going to score victory points both during each of the individual rounds, but also you're going to score victory points, as we said, during each of those 2 fests and at the end of the game. Up here is the points you're going to score, depending upon whether it's Summerfest or Oktoberfest and which of the 3 places you get to place in. Obviously, we have a 3-player game set up, so we're going to score points depending upon where we fall in each of those different categories at the end of those different rounds.
Yeah, and these judge tiles are also variable, except for the final judge. At the end of every game, you're going to score 2 times the point value of your lowest rated brew. So you kind of have to do a balancing act. You don't want to just leave one behind, like maybe this green player here, because you're going to get 0 points at the end of the game if you do that.
Also, across the top of the board, you're going to have the flavors that are available for people to buy. Now, these come in things like licorice, nutmeg, oatmeal, a variety of different things you can throw into your pail. Each of them have 2 different, or 3 basic things you need to look at. Number 1 is the color of it, because that's important for the judges. The second thing is an ability that you can also use instead of putting that into one of your different barrels. You can expend it and then get whatever is on the bottom. These are typically the actions that you can take with your dice. There's another way to get those different actions. And then across the top right is always a different type of bonus that you get when you brew that type of beer, and this flavor is in that particular pail. This one that you see here at the star simply allows you to copy another type of flavor's actions, but there's all kinds of different ones. Ones that give you money, ones that allow you to move up more spaces on each of these tracks, ones that give you victory points. So it really depends upon how you want to tailor each one of these different jugs.
Yeah, and if you look at your player board, that's all held on your player board. You can slot those ingredients to any of your brews. Now, some of these player boards have variable player powers. The powers aren't finalized yet, so we're not going to talk in depth about them, but they are going to be different. The equipment you start with is different. The powers you start with are different. But generally, once you slot these ingredients, they're slotted there.
Yeah.
So you need to think carefully about where you want to put these flavors.
Let's talk about the player boards themselves and what you're actually looking at. Each player, as you said, is going to have one of these in front of them. The powers, which are not done at this point. Your 4 different types of ales, which are going to be here as well, or beers. Your equipment, each player is going to have equipment that needs to be cleaned every single round in order to brew more types of beer. So you're going to be putting ingredients on them and then making those flasks or those equipment dirty. Across the bottom is the place for your 3 dice. When you roll your 3 dice, you're going to put them here, and then during your turn, you're going to expend those dice, taking them off your player board to take the actions that are on the dice themselves. And then all the different steps are right here. So it's right there in front of you on the actions that you get to take from round to round. So let's talk about how the actual game is played. At the start of a round, everybody's going to pick up their dice and they're going to roll them in front of them. These are the dice that you have to use that round. However, there's a trading option here.
Yeah.
The players can trade with other players for dice. You can give a dice to someone and then give you a dice back. Some of the player abilities might key off of those actions if you do trade. When you trade, it's just a 1-for-1 trade. If you decide not to trade, you can keep all the dice that you happen to roll that particular turn. However, you have the ability at any time to spend $1 to change that die facing to any other face. So there's the dice manipulation portion of the game. It's very easy to change the dice to what you want, but you have to have a ways to get reoccurring money through the course of the game.
Yeah, and what's interesting is if you ever have 3 of a kind, you get a free reroll of all your dice. So if you're in a situation like what you're showing here, where you have 2 of one action, if I had that missing action, you might want to make a trade with me. And then now you have 3 of a kind, you can reroll all of those.
Or I could spend $1 and change that to that face and then reroll them again. Then once people are locked into the dice, they are simply going to put them onto their player board. Starting with the first player, they get to take an action, or all of the actions with
all
their
3
dice.
of their actions in a row.
And let's talk about all the different actions because they're pretty easy to talk about. I'll talk about the calendar first.
Okay.
If you have a calendar, you're going to look down here and see what month you are in. Right now, we are in the month of Summerfest. This is always going to tell you the action that you get to take with that particular calendar. In this case, it's brewing a beer or brewing one of your different jugs. If you spend $2 by expending the calendar, you can instead take the bottom action. So the calendar is going to rotate and change every single round. So sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, depending upon what you're trying to accomplish at that portion of the game.
Yeah, and those tiles are all random, so you can't plan ahead for a specific event to come out when you need it to come out.
Exactly.
So I'll talk about the sanitation action. As you brew your beer, you're dirtying your equipment. You're going to have these sanitation markers in front of your player board. Basically, you spend that, you take one off, you clean that flask, you can use that to brew again.
And you have to brew beer as well. In order to brew beer, you have to put ingredients into one of the jugs. In order to do that, you're going to have to take one of these and take one of these tokens and place it on one of the jugs that you are trying to brew either that turn or in a future turn, because you may not always be able to have the dice or the actions to be able to brew in the same turn. In this case, I'm going to put it on my stout because hopefully on that same turn, I rolled a brew action. That allows you to actually pick any one of the jugs and brew by taking that ingredient, flipping it over to the dirty side, just as you had said, and put it into the far right one. These are always going to fill up from right to left. And when they get cleaned, they're going to be cleaned from left to right. But when you actually brew, you're going to look at how many of these different lines or pips are there. That tells you how much you're going to progress on that individual track. In this case, I'm doing my stout with 3 different actions. So I'm going to take my stout for the blue player and move up 3, getting any of the benefits that I happen to do in that, plus any of the benefits from that particular jug. In this case, it has an action that allows me to also progress my stout. So this is kind of the engine building portion of the game as well.
Definitely
you're going to be buying these things and putting different flavors in there.
You really have to plan ahead where you put those flavors and even where you put your ingredients. If you look at the board, you'll notice there are only 4 tracks, up to 5 players competing to be the highest in each of these tracks. So you have to decide if you're going to go all in on one or maybe try to come in second place on a bunch.
Yeah.
And it depends on how you're going to get your victory points. So we talked about ingredients, brewing. I think the only thing we haven't talked about is the flavor action. And when you take a flavor action, you could do 2 things. Choose from 2 things. First, you can take one of the flavor cards that's on the flavor row, or just take the top card randomly and hope you get something good. Once you have it in front of you, you could then use that action later to take whatever's on the bottom and discard that card, or slot that into your beer. And you could come up with some crazy flavors. I mean, brown sugar apple stout I've got going here. So like, these combinations, you're going to come up with some crazy, wacky beer combinations.
And obviously, the reason why you want to put these flavors in here, they're purely abstract by means of how they work within the game. But the most important thing is the bonus that they have in the upper right-hand corner. By brewing certain kind of beers and having certain kind of flavors in them, they're going to get you not only progression on those tracks, but they're also going to allow you to get reoccurring money, to get victory points, and be able to brew other beers that are on the left or the right of those as well. So that engine building portion is important. Plus the color of the beer that you're buying and putting into your area is also important for the in-game judges that are going to happen at the obviously at the very end. So typically you're going to have 3 actions every single turn, but one of the things on the player board that you also can do is spend $3 at any given time to take 1 extra action and 1 extra action only. So you can have 4 actions if you have the ability to get an engine building with money.
Yes, if you have enough money, you can completely mitigate the dice. You can change the face of your dice, and you can take an additional action of any action. So you kind of have a lot of flexibility. Between that and the trading, you can generally try to do
everything you want to do.
Anything you want to do. It's just a matter of planning that ahead and using that mitigation, right? You don't want to run out of money. It can be pretty punishing.
So when all the players have used all their dice, that's going to signify the end of the round. The stout marker is going to pass to the next player, and then everyone's going to roll their dice. You're going to do this for each of the different rounds in the game. During the Summerfest and during the Oktoberfest, there's going to be a scoring round. As we said, it's strictly going to depend on whoever's progressed the furthest in each of those 4 different tracks. So you're going to score for both the Summer and the Oktoberfest, with the Oktoberfest adding a 3rd place marker in a 3-player game. So you actually score some points where you don't during the Summerfest. Finally, at the final round of the game, again, you're going to score according to those placements on these boards, plus the judges. And again, these judges do a variety of different things.
Yeah, and what's cool about the judge tiles that I like is anyone can qualify for them. Yeah. Basically, as long as you fulfilled the judge's condition, you're going to get those victory points. Some of them are really difficult and worth more points, because some require you just to have like certain flavors spread out across your board. Some require to have specific flavors all layered on the same beer. So you need to plan, like if you want that, you need to start doing that from the beginning. You can't wait till the last round and say, oh shoot, you're limited to 3 actions, so you can't just completely change up your board.
Then each player is going to score 1 victory point for every $3 they have left. And then the final one, which is always available, which we explained at the very beginning, your lowest token, wherever that happens to be, is going to score double the amount of points that it shows on there. So in this case, blue is at the 3 level, meaning they get 6 points at the end of the game. So you obviously want to race up to the top in a very specific category, but you also want to balance that, because at the end of the game, you're getting even more victory points for your lowest one. So you want your lowest one to be high up as well.
Yeah, I mean, you can win this game without being in first place on any of the tracks.
You can.
If you're in second in everything, that's a lot more points than being first in one thing. Plus, getting everything up to like 5 or 6. I mean, you could potentially get 14 points at the end of the game just from having your tracks up high enough.
So, guys, that is Homebrewers. It's from Greater Than Games. 2 to 5 players.
2 to 5 players.
Should be on Kickstarter right now. Of course, check out the Kickstarter page. They'll have all the newest graphics, art, design, everything else that will be included. If you guys have any questions, make them in the comments below, and we will check you guys out next time.